So how does a group of colonies, designed pretty much just to make money for a faraway empire, turn itself into a nation that's supposedly founded on liberty? Well, today we're going to unpack that exact story. It's a journey through economics, a revolution, and some really tough and sometimes pretty dark compromises that created the United States. Okay, so here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll look at the economic engine that ran the British Empire. Then, we'll see how a super expensive war made that engine start to sputter. We'll pinpoint the one battle that really turned the tide of the revolution, watch the intense arguments that built a new government, and finally, look at the crucial promise that pulled the whole thing together.
First up, an engine for empire. Before we can even get to the whole freedom and liberty thing, we got to get one simple fact straight. The American colonies were founded for business. Their main purpose was not to build some new, enlightened society, it was to make Great Britain rich.
The entire relationship was built on this one big idea called mercantilism. And to put it simply, it just meant the colonies existed for one reason: to enrich the mother country. The whole game was to sell as much stuff as you could and buy as little as you could, making sure all the money flowed in one direction, straight back to Britain.
And here's how that system actually worked. Think of it like a mandatory round trip. The colonies had to ship out all their cheap raw materials. Timber, cotton, tobacco. Britain would take that stuff, turn it into expensive finished goods like furniture and textiles, and then guess where they sold it? Right back to the colonies, for a huge profit. It was a perfect closed loop, and Britain made money at every single step.
So at the end of the day, the colonies weren't really seen as a growing society full of people. They were seen as a piece of machinery. They were the engine that powered the whole British Empire, giving it cheap fuel with their raw materials, and then acting as the guaranteed customer for all the expensive stuff.
All right, so let's shift gears and see how a massive global war started to create some serious cracks in this perfect imperial machine. This is where things really start to change. And that change started with the French and Indian War. Now, it was a huge victory for the British, and they got a ton of new land, but winning that war came with an absolutely staggering price tag that basically doubled Britain's national debt. The empire had written itself a blank check to win, and now it was time to pay up.
What's really interesting here is that even before the war, Benjamin Franklin had this idea called the Albany Plan of Union. It was a proposal to get the colonies to start working together, for their own defense, but it totally failed. Why? Because neither the colonies nor the British government wanted to give up even a little bit of their own power. And this slide right here, this is the whole conflict in one picture. On one side, you've got the colonists who want to expand west and have more say in their own lives. And on the other, you have Britain, rejecting any kind of colonial unity and instead just demanding that they foot the bill for the war.
So Britain's solution was simple: just make the colonists pay for everything. And they justified this with an idea called parliamentary sovereignty, which is basically the belief that Parliament's power was absolute. Just imagine being told that a government 3,000 miles away, where you have zero representation, can just decide to take your money whenever it feels like it. For the colonists, this wasn't just about taxes anymore. This felt like tyranny.
So you can see where this is going, right? All that anger eventually just explodes into the Revolutionary War. But winning that war was going to take more than just anger. It was going to take a single, game-changing moment to really turn the tide.
Look, the first few years of the war were just brutal. I mean, you've got this ragtag Continental Army going up against the most powerful military on the planet. Yeah, they had some huge morale-boosting wins, like Washington's surprise attack at Trenton, but they were still losing, badly. To have any chance at all, they needed a huge, undeniable victory.
And that one moment, the moment that changed the entire direction of the war, came in 1777 at a little place called Saratoga.
Now, the real reason Saratoga was such a big deal wasn't just about winning a battle. It was about what happened after. This victory sent a shockwave all the way across the Atlantic. For the very first time, it proved to the world, and more importantly, to Britain's old enemy, France, that this American rebellion was the real deal. This was all the proof France needed to officially join the war as an American ally, and they brought money, troops, and a navy, which would change everything.
Okay, so they won the war. Amazing, right? But now they had an even bigger problem than beating an empire. How do you actually build a country from absolute scratch?
So the first big fight was about power. It was the big states like Virginia versus the small states like New Jersey. The Virginia plan said representation should be based on population, which of course the big states loved. The New Jersey plan said every state should get an equal vote. So the solution? the Great Compromise. It cleverly did both. They created a Congress with two parts, a House of Representatives based on population, and a Senate where every single state gets 2 equal seats.
But there was another compromise needed to hold this new country together. And this one was much, much darker. The southern states insisted that their enslaved population, people they legally considered property, should be counted to give them more power in the government. The result was the 3/5 Compromise, a truly chilling bargain that got written right into the Constitution.
So this compromise did two things at once. On one hand, it gave the southern states way more representatives in Congress, which boosted their political power. But on the other hand, it also meant they had to pay more in federal taxes. It was a cold political calculation just to keep the country from falling apart before it even started, but it came at a horrific cost, tragically weaving slavery right into the nation's DNA.
And right in the middle of all these crazy, intense arguments, you have this one guy, James Madison. His Virginia plan really became the blueprint for the entire new government, and his relentless work shaping and arguing for it is what earned him the nickname Father of the Constitution.
All right, so they've got the Constitution written down on paper. But believe it or not, the fight was far from over. A huge part of the population was absolutely terrified that they had just fought a war to get rid of one powerful tyrannical government, only to create a new one.
This kicked off this massive, nationwide debate. Was this new constitution the perfect plan for a new republic, or was it a really dangerous document that actually failed to protect the very freedoms they had just fought and died for?
So you basically had two teams. On one side, you have the Federalists. They argued in the famous Federalist Papers that the country absolutely needed a strong central government just to survive. But on the other side, you had the Anti-Federalists, and they were warning everyone that without specific protections, this new government could easily just crush the rights of the people. And the solution? The thing that finally sealed the deal? Was a promise. A historic promise. To get the Anti-Federalists on board, the Federalists agreed that as soon as the Constitution was passed, they would immediately add a list of amendments to protect individual rights from the government. That promise became our Bill of Rights, and it was the final piece of the puzzle needed to unite the nation.
Which leaves us with one last and really big question. The founders knew they couldn't possibly list every single human right. They even put in the 9th Amendment just to say so. So the question they left behind for all of us, for our generation, is this. If our most important rights aren't all written down, then who gets to decide what they are, and how do we protect them?